Yo gamers, what is good? Welcome back to another Switch 2 countdown video where we are going to be covering some of the news and developments in the Switch 2 scene this week, as well as reminisce on 1 year in the Switch's life as we build up to 2025. Since this is the third episode, we're going to be looking at the third year for the Nintendo Switch, 2019. So with that said, let's just get right into things. 2019 kicked off with Yoshi's Crafted World in March. Now I actually have a lot of things to say about this game, and I do plan on making a dedicated video review for it at some point, because frankly, I will not tolerate the slander this game has received online. Immediately, this game drew a lot of comparisons to the previous Yoshi title, Yoshi's Woolly World. And look, Yoshi's Woolly World is a great game, but please, let's not get all hyperbolic here. It's an 8 out of 10 at best. It's a competent Yoshi platformer with some cute visuals and nice background music. I'm gonna nuke you guys with this take, but the only difference between New Super Mario Bros. U and Yoshi's Woolly World is that the latter has a more distinct art style. I know, that's a pretty spicy take to start off this video, but I do think it's important because for whatever reason, this glazing of Yoshi's Woolly World led to a lot of very disingenuous criticisms of Yoshi's Crafted World, in my humble opinion. Yoshi's Crafted World is a banger! This game runs circles around Woolly World. There's way more unique level design, there's way more unique level theming, there's a lot more depth to the levels themselves as you can now interact with things in the foreground and the background, and in a very 3D Mario style of game design. There are unique missions that you have to go back to for each level where you have to find a certain object or a certain amount of objects and bring them to the robots. Oh, and it's all packaged in an arts and crafts style way more impressive than Yoshi's Woolly World. Look, Yoshi's Woolly World has a very cozy yarn aesthetic, but this time around each level feels like a real life diorama, and you can really see how each of these level set pieces were made using real life objects. It is so charming and clever, and you just can't help but fall in love with this game. There's just that patent Nintendo charm present in every single level. Seriously, do not sleep on this game. Do not let the weirdos online tell you it sucks, because Yoshi's Crafted World is one of the greatest platformers I have ever played. And I am being 100% serious. Okay, cooling down from the rant a bit, April gave us the Nintendo Labo VR. This is the final kit in the Nintendo Labo series, and I actually think this is by far the most interesting because, well, it gives you a little bit of a virtual reality experience. They even updated Super Mario Odyssey to include some VR levels or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to be completely playable within a first-person VR perspective. I respect the ambition on Nintendo's end to really try to bring a lot of these games that they had already released into a new dimension with VR, and I certainly got more game mileage out of this than the other Labo kits, but honestly, with a screen that can only give you like freaking 240p in a VR setting, it's just not ideal. It's not something you want to do for very long, and it's more of just like a neat novelty rather than a legitimate VR system. Okay, moving along to June, we got Super Mario Maker 2. This was definitely one of the most anticipated sequels on the Nintendo Switch at the time, and I think they did a really good job with this game. They flooded us with new level design elements, new enemies, new objects, and a ton of other things that you could put into your levels to make them more dynamic and interesting than those from the Wii U Super Mario Maker. They also included a brand new campaign mode, which is super charming. There's a lot of neat little character interactions, a fun overworld, and some great levels designed by the Nintendo team themselves. That being said, even though I feel like on the surface this is pretty much everything you could want in a Mario Maker sequel, functionally it's just not quite as fun to play as the Wii U game in my opinion. And I've seen this sentiment shared with a few other people online. Ultimately, it boils down to the gamepad being such a great control scheme for Mario Maker. The way that it was set up for Mario Maker 2 were these menu wheels. In these wheels, you could quickly select an object or an enemy or a platform type from different categories, and it's not that this is a bad approach, and honestly I do think they did a good job with what they were given, but it just pales in comparison to the fluidity that was in the Wii U game, where you could just simply tap on an object and put it into the level. It was very quick, very seamless, and it never had any interruptions while trying to create your levels. For this reason, I was a lot less invested in the Mario making of this game, and more so in the Mario playing, because there were even more ways to play people's levels online, and later on they actually did a pretty massive free update to the game where you could even create world maps in essentially a mini Mario game. Ultimately, I think Mario Maker 2's heart was in the right place, but unfortunately it just felt a bit clunky compared to the Wii U version, and I guess that was just a little bit disappointing and kind of an unforeseen consequence of bringing this series to a more traditional controller scheme. Alrighty, let's get into July now with Fire Emblem Three Houses. This game is freaking incredible. I love Fire Emblem Three Houses so much, and if you saw my video talking about the potential of a future Nintendo and MAPPA anime collaboration, you would know this is at the forefront of my wish list for a Nintendo anime adaptation. With a fantastic storyline, a great cast of characters, deep and engaging combat, as well as a ton of fun extra planning and unit building mechanics, Fire Emblem Three Houses is just the king of the SRPG genre. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the game's absolutely insane soundtrack. I mean, this has got to be one of the best soundtracks of the entire Switch library, and the main theme honestly might be my favorite main theme of any game ever. It is just the most over-the-top, edgy, epic anime theme ever, and I love it for that. And bro, when that chorus comes in, you cannot tell me that it just nuclear punch of dopamine breaks through the stratosphere of your eardrums and you just want to run a 30-mile marathon. I swear it always gets me going so much, but you know, I could talk about what gets me going all day. We should probably move on to something that doesn't get me going as much, which is August's Astral Chain. I'm gonna be real with you, I have tried to start this game 3 times before, and without fail, at about an hour and 10 minutes in, I always KO. I just always fall asleep, I just crash. I don't know if it's the game's fault or if I just happen to always play it on days where I'm exhausted. I just have not been able to get into it. And that is a shame because the combat looks super sick. I love the visual style, you know, it's just very clean anime. The story seems pretty interesting as well as the world. And I don't know, I feel like it's the type of game I would enjoy a lot, but I've just struggled to really get into it. So I don't really have a lot else to say on it. One day I will beat it though, probably, unless I crash again at the 1 hour mark. I do remember the intro has you driving a motorcycle though, and I thought that was super cool. But anyways, September, baby! This has to be one of the most packed months Nintendo has ever had on the Switch. And I am going to cheat a little bit because one of these games was digitally released back in February, but I want to count the physical release, and this is just such a special title that I couldn't help but talk about it in these retrospectives. That, and I also forgot to put it on my 2018 retrospective because technically it would have been in that year because it's February. Anyways, autistic reasoning aside, Tetris 99, holy crap, this game was so addictive for those first couple of months. I remember in between Smash Ultimate sessions, me and my buds would all compete to see who would be the first Victory Royale winner, or whatever you call it, of Tetris 99, and I did get a couple dubs, so that was pretty cool. You know that went on my Snap story back in the day. I don't really know what else to say other than it was just a brilliant combination of the trendy Battle Royale as well as the classic Tetris formula. It was very addictive, and it was also a great incentive for people to sign up for the Nintendo Switch Online membership, as it was essentially a free game if you had that. So that is pretty cool. But September had quite a few other releases. The next one is Daemon X Machina, which funnily enough is actually getting a sequel this year for the Nintendo Switch 2. This game was announced back in E3 2018, and it does look cool. I actually do own it, but I just haven't gone around to playing it yet. It seems like the reception was somewhat muted, so I don't know, maybe it was just kind of an okay title, but the next game, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, a mediocre title, it was not. Link's Awakening was always my favorite 2D Zelda game, and I was so excited when they announced the remake in the February 2019 Direct. I also think that this game was responsible for ushering in the modern Nintendo remake approach. Basically, they make the game exactly as it was back in the day, but with the technology of modern gaming systems. And of course, sometimes they'll add in a few quality of life things here and there, but yeah, you'll see with future Nintendo Switch remakes, they do kind of follow this same general formula. And I do think that's a very good approach when it comes to remaking games. Link's Awakening is such a fantastic game, and the dungeons are good, but I wouldn't say that's actually what makes this my favorite 2D Zelda game. More than that, it's the world, the characters, and the story. Modern Zelda games have these big, grandiose, epic, blockbuster hero's journey adventures, and that is cool. It's very exciting, it's very fun, you feel like you're playing a very high quality product when you are experiencing these stories. However, I think there was a certain art to the deceptively minimalistic story design in older Zelda games like Link's Awakening or The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, where they take a seemingly very simple premise, but it's actually one with a lot of existential depth to it, and it really gets you thinking and connected to this world in an emotional way that I just don't feel like some of these very big blockbuster titles nowadays can. And again, I'm not saying this to hate on the new games, I also love these epic stories, but I just think that there was something kind of special about these older, comparatively maybe more simple storylines. And I know that Link's Awakening is like a 20+ year old game now, and even the remake is going on what, like 6-7 years now, but I still don't want to exactly spoil it, just because if you haven't played the game yet, certain narrative reveals are just so much more impactful when you're playing it blind. Oh yeah, and the music was also awesome. I was also a big fan of the art style. I know it was a little controversial, some people thought it was a little bit too simple, but I actually quite liked it. Alrighty, the next September release was Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition S. I think that was everything. There might have been a few other words in there, but wow, this game is great. It is just a pure epic JRPG. Speaking of kind of simple narratives, but you know, old and true, Dragon Quest XI is just a classic hero's adventure. You have a, very exotic group of characters that join with you, and you just go throughout this beautiful world fighting unique enemies and entering very mystical locations. I have not beat the game yet, but I absolutely intend on doing so one of these days, and if you haven't played a JRPG yet, and maybe you're kind of, not a weeaboo, this is a great game to still give you that JRPG fix and some fun combat and great worlds without maybe veering into the more cultured aspects of the genre. That being said, I do think there was a pretty bad bunny girl in the game, so you'll still get a little culture. But okay, let's move to October, where we got 2 releases. The first one was Ring Fit Adventure. This was essentially Nintendo's follow-up to the Wii Fit games, and I have to say, this game is great. I think it is so much more interesting than Wii Fit, which was essentially just a loosely interactive workout video, right? Like, it's basically just watching a virtual trainer do some exercise poses, and you stand on a piece of plastic. Cool, and there were some fun mini games, but that's just it. The most fun the game had to offer were in those mini games. And this is why I think the direction they went in for Ring Fit was so smart, because essentially they made a game that you control by doing exercise rather than making a workout that you just kind of interact with. There's this whole campaign filled with, platforming-esque levels, turn-based RPG combat, like boss fights. There's a lot of different variety, but it works really well in the context of a workout game, surprisingly. And I say this as somebody who goes to the gym like 3 or 4 times a week. The workouts are actually pretty good in this game. They definitely push you more so than I felt like the ones in Wii Fit did. So yeah, this is a great game. I love it. I love that Nintendo tries to make games that, push us to be better, whether that's mentally or physically. And I'm really excited to see what they do with this series, or I guess in general with their exercise games going forward onto the Switch too. Maybe with the camera they could even do some like Connect kind of revival stuff. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. Anyways, there was one other game released in October, and very fittingly so, and it was actually released on a non-Friday, which at the time was kind of taboo, Nintendo only released their games on Friday for about a decade there, but this was Luigi's Mansion 3, released on Halloween of 2019. Guys, I freaking love this game. This is yet another certified banger in this lineup of great games in 2019 that is just filled with that classic Nintendo charm. There is so much attention to detail in this game, where practically every object is interactable, there's secrets hiding behind every corner, there's a lot of very creative puzzles, and there's rooms that are themed after different areas, which is also very interesting. It is just such a great game. Luigi's Mansion 2, while I think it was fun, and it worked really well on a handheld, sort of betrayed some of the aspects that people loved about the original Luigi's Mansion. And with Luigi's Mansion 3, I feel like they found a perfect middle ground between some of the strong points in Luigi's Mansion 2 and some of the strong points in Luigi's Mansion 1, while still making something entirely original. This game is so good, and surprisingly a fantastic local co-op game. So if you have a bud, or fellas, if you want to get your girl a little Gooigi'd up before getting her a little more Gooigi'd later on, Luigi's Mansion 3, that is the game for you. I am killing myself after that joke. Alrighty, November 2019, we get the first for real Pokemon game on Nintendo Switch, Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. Now, these games actually had quite a bit of controversy going into them, because Game Freak rather infamously stated they would not be putting every Pokemon from previous games into Sword and Shield, so that they could focus on the quality of animations and the quality of the models and all that, BS for these games. Now, gamers, I'm gonna be real with you. I actually didn't buy this game until just last Christmas. So Christmas 2024, I treated myself well, and I went out and bought Pokemon Sword and Shield so that I could once and for all put the question to rest: were the criticisms valid? Does this game suck? Did Game Freak fall off? Is Pokemon over? Well, I have to say, my results were rather shocking. I actually really liked Pokemon Sword and Shield, but let me make something clear. Although I think these are very fun games and very competent Pokemon experiences, it is not some fancy schmancy, big AAA Pokemon home console experience that I think a lot of the fans were hoping for. No, this is very much just a Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch, but I actually appreciate it a lot for that. And maybe this is a hot take, and I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but I actually far prefer Pokemon Sword and Shield to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. These games are just very pure, they know what they're trying to be, it's just Pokemon. I found that the world was actually somewhat interesting to explore. The new Pokemon kind of ranged from really terrible to, kinda cool. It was a pretty missed generation in terms of new Pokemon, in my opinion. The music was awesome. I mean, there was a ton of great tracks in here. And honestly, I just love the unapologetic anime style that Sun and Moon, these games, and Legends Arceus had. I like it. I think that fits Pokemon very well. And overall, I just found Pokemon Sword and Shield to be fun games. I went in pretty pessimistic and I was like, this game is gonna suck. I am going to hate this game. But I came out of it being like, holy crap, that game was pretty good actually. I have particularly refined Pokemon game taste that most of the online Pokemon community just couldn't fathom, but frankly, I would say this was an easy top 5 Pokemon game for me. It really was quite fun, and I guess the moral of the story was, I guess don't let the internet make your opinions for you, right? You gotta try things out on your own, and I think you gotta try to make organic opinions. You shouldn't just try to always latch on to the takes of certain YouTubers or people on X or from certain news articles. You gotta, live your life, you gotta kind of figure out who you are, what your tastes are, and try things out so that you can have real opinions and not be a freaking lizard robot who spends all day on the internet. And wow, that was a pretty boomer thing I just said, but whatever. Anyways, the next game that came out was actually illegal in the USA. How is that for clickbait? Dr. Kawashima's Brain Training for Nintendo Switch. This series made its debut back on the DS and it was a pretty big deal then. However, I guess sometime in the 2010s, there was a law put into effect in the United States that you can't sell education games, or at least you can't sell games that, are kind of marketed as helping you become smarter. I don't know. I think that's pretty retarded if you ask me, because it's like, okay, what? So you can't sell a math game and say this will help you get better at math? Like, dude, if you're practicing the math in the game, you will be better at math. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it wouldn't be the first time the USA has made a pretty weird law. But I did smuggle this game in from Japan. I've played it for 4 minutes. This game is fine. It is very bare bones. It feels like even more bare bones than some of the later DS or 3DS entries. It is just like straight to the point brain training. I don't know how much this cost when it came out. I got it for like 10 bucks in Japan. It is a $10 maximum game. It's really not, there's not a lot here. But if you ever really wanted some brain age, I guess you can get it here. Okay, and then finally wrapping up the 3rd year in January of 2020, we got Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE Encore. This is actually the only Wii U port of the entire 3rd year of the Switch's life, which was definitely a breath of fresh air compared to 2018. And I have to say, I think it's kind of cool they decided to bring this game back because, wow, this was a very niche and kind of obscure release on the Wii U. And even on the Switch, I don't feel like it really got that big, but it is cool it's here. It's basically Persona at home. Like, it is fun, and the battle system is definitely unique and a little different than Persona, but it's very similar. I feel like this is basically a workaround to have a Persona game on a Nintendo system before Atlus just opened the floodgates and put all of them on multi-platforms. But anyways, it is a good game. It is just extremely J-pop in-your-face like anime weeaboo trash, so I love that, but I know not everyone's a big PP gamer like me, so maybe you're not quite at that point of cultural appreciation yet. Anyways, that wraps up 3 years of the Nintendo Switch. Once again, we had 14 game releases this year, and the Switch total units sold skyrocketed up to 55.77 million. Basically 20 million sold in this year, which is kind of insane. The momentum was on the sharp rise, and things just looked really good for Nintendo. And I absolutely loved this year of releases. I think if I had to describe most of these games, I would say they just embodied that Nintendo charm that I love so much about the company. There are also multiple games on this list that I would give a 10 out of 10 to. Yoshi's Crafted World, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, and Luigi's Mansion 3. Honestly, I might as well give one to Link's Awakening as well, but there were just like so many games in this list that I would say are contenders for some of the best games of the entire generation. I'm not sure if I would say there's anything in here that would go up to the likes of Super Mario Odyssey, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, or Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which I would say are contenders for some of the best games of all time. But these are certainly some of the best games of the system. And it was so nice breaking away from the constant stream of re-releases from Wii U ports to remakes that we were seeing in 2018. The Switch was finally starting to mold its own identity, and it was just an incredible one. So many super high quality experiences, so many series experiencing their peak on this system. It was just a great time to be a gamer, and especially a Nintendo fan. I loved 2019. It's honestly not far behind from 2017 as one of the best years in Nintendo's entire legacy. But yeah, if you guys have any extra thoughts you just really want to share to me about 2019, go ahead and drop those in a comment below, and I'll catch you guys later. Yo gamers, what is good? We are now going to be talking about some of the Switch 2 developments over the past week. Now definitely the highlight, especially if you're living in the US or in Canada, was that pre-orders officially opened. And they closed within seconds later. Yeah, this was a mess. Pre-orders went up at midnight on Thursday, April 24th, and pretty much immediately were sold out on every retailer. Mercifully, I was able to secure a Switch 2, and I also got pretty much every accessory and game that I wanted with it. Now the only things I'm waiting on getting are a 1TB microSD express card, Bravely Default HD Remaster, and the GameCube controller for the Nintendo Classics GameCube coming to Switch Online for the Switch 2. But I got everything else. I got the Switch 2, I got Mario Kart World, I got the camera, I got the Pro Controller, I got the carrying case, I got Street Fighter 6, I didn't get any of the amiibo. I don't really care too much about getting the ones this time. So yeah, I'm very happy, but it wasn't easy. It definitely was a bit stressful in the moment, but it was also kind of fun, if I have to be honest. Like, there was this exhilaration of, you know, refreshing the page and going between the different screens and be like, oh crap, I got into this one. And, you know, the moment. Maybe I wouldn't be so happy if I didn't actually get one, but it was good. My brother is able to get one as well, so everyone that I know who was, you know, really wanting to get one right away is able to get one, so I'm happy about that. And, you know, for all the doomers and gloomers out there who were saying, you know, Switch 2 is gonna fail, drop the price, all that stuff, well, I guess the messaging was not received, because this thing is shattering records. In Japan, on the Nintendo website alone, okay? Keep in mind, that's not from other retailers, that's just from the My Nintendo website alone. In Japan, over 2.2 million people registered interest. That is insane. For some comparison, the Switch 1 sold about 330,000 units in its first month in Japan. Now we're looking at like orders of magnitudes higher in terms of demand for this thing, just in the Nintendo website alone for Japan. It seems like this thing is basically sold out everywhere in Japan, in United States, and in most countries in Europe. It's safe to say the Switch 2 has officially gone nuclear. Everybody wants this thing. I could honestly see this system selling upwards of 5 million units within its first month on the market. And in fact, I read this article today that some analysts, which I don't really know if their word is worth putting stock into, but they were saying that the Switch 2 could sell somewhere between 6 to 8 million units in the first month. That's just freaking insane. Like, I think we're getting ready for absolutely a historic success for Nintendo with the Switch 2. So I'm very excited about that. I'm really happy the company is doing well now. I do hope that, you know, we can gatekeep a few of the normies and freaks who got into the Switch scene with the higher pricing on the Switch 2, but hopefully just the cool people will come back and they'll be able to get a Switch 2. Nintendo also had a creator's voice go up this week for Hogwarts Legacy, which I don't understand. I think that they're just re-releasing the game on the Switch 2. This is not an upgrade pack. And after doing some research, which basically looked like just going into the comments and, you know, rewatching the video a couple times, I think the reason why this isn't simply an upgrade pack is because they're actually fundamentally changing the game with new models, new assets, new lighting, new engine, new particle effects, all that stuff. It's basically like the PS5 version now. And I guess that kind of warrants a second purchase, because it's not, you know, as simple as just saying, oh, graphics good now. They're also adding like mouse control and some other things. So I don't know. I don't know enough about this game to know if that's like a shady business move or if that is actually warranted. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, because, you know, I would imagine that remaking the entire game now with the new visuals is like a pretty big thing that probably cost a bit, but who knows? Maybe it really is just a greedy company move. There was an Oblivion remaster that was kind of like shadow dropped. I guess it was pretty heavily leaked and rumored before release, so that could have been a strategic tactic on Microsoft's end to avoid paying for marketing, or maybe it just actually did leak out. Currently no word on a Switch 2 version, but I have very high confidence that it will eventually be on there, as well as many of Microsoft's other games. And I think the Nintendo Switch 2 play experience is wrapping up its USA tour this weekend with a Dallas pit stop. So yeah, I guess after this we all just kind of wait for another month and then we get the Switch 2. I have to say, I am really feeling the waiting right now. I just want this thing so bad, man. I'm so excited to rip into the new Mario Kart and just play that thing for hours on end. I am praying that Target gets these things out at least by June 5th. And preferably earlier in the day, and it's not delayed for a bit. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I did pre-order from Target. They clutched up. So yeah, I guess we just kind of wait now. And I'm not really sure if there's going to be many other massive news developments between now and when the system releases. I mean, obviously, the media is going to get their access to it earlier, so they'll probably post reviews and things like that in the week or two leading up to it. But I think that about wraps up all of the recent news stories for Nintendo Switch 2. So we're just gonna wait now. We are 6 weeks out. Let's freaking go. I will catch you guys later. Peace.